mujahideen, jihadists, have overthrown the Bashar al-Assad regime in Syria. They began in Aleppo and moved south to Damascus. But why is it, do you suppose, that almost no one is speaking of what these Islamic terrorists actually represent, what they believe, what they intend to accomplish, what motivates them? Why do you suppose that virtually every mainstream media outlet in the world is projecting their own viewpoints on these Islamic mujahideen, saying that, oh, they toppled a terrible dictator, and so they must be good guys. They released political prisoners, so they must be admirable. They say that they will protect women rather than degrade them, and that they will not harass ethnic or religious minorities. But why would they say such a thing? Why would they infer that these Islamic mujahideen have any interest in establishing a Western-style democracy in Syria, allowing the people to choose their own fate, avoiding the arcanic nature of Sharia law? Why are the talking heads of virtually every mainstream media outlet in the world speaking this way? Is it ignorance, or do they have an agenda? I know a great deal about this subject because, unlike any of those who speak through the mainstream media, I actually predicted what was going to occur. Not just a few days in advance of it occurring, but initially 10 years, then 5 years ago, then again a year ago, putting it all in writing with copyright dates to prove that I have made these predictions. And then again, just a matter of 2 or 3 weeks before the overthrow of the Syrian government, I doubled down. I explained exactly what would occur, when it would occur, and why. More importantly, I conveyed the consequence of this overturning of the Assad regime and where it would lead. Now, one doesn't have to be a prophet to know the future. We can look at the past and know precisely what is going to come. For example, what happened when America went after the Russian-backed government in Afghanistan, thinking that we could give the Russians a taste of what they gave us in Vietnam if we armed the Taliban, rented them, if you will, from the Pakistani government, and let them shoot down Russian aircraft and torch Russian tanks with our weapons. What did we get? Look at Afghanistan now, under the complete control of the Taliban and the complete deprivation of women's rights. A totally dictatorial government. We had thought, I speak of we as loosely suggesting that I'm speaking for America, but I have no allegiance to the United States. But America leaders decided that since Saddam Hussein was a bad man, that the world would be better if we deposed him. So the United States invaded Iraq. And at the time, I was the only person who said, if you do this, the outcome will be egregious. You will most certainly make a bad situation worse, and there is no chance whatsoever that any good will come out of this. And just as was the case of Afghanistan, where I also spoke against intervention, saying that lashing out at a symptom of Islam was not going to solve the problem. Going after one man and one organization does nothing to dull the aspirations of a religion of now 2 billion people. But no one took the time or was even afraid to analyze the true nature of Islam, the death cult that has emerged from the sands of the Arabian desert, to be able to predict the future, to know how this religion would behave. Look what happened when we deposed Saddam Hussein. What we got was Iraq being given as a gift to the Ayatollahs in Iran. And it was predictable. I did more than 5,000 talk radio shows as a guest on syndicated programs worldwide to say this is exactly what was going to happen. And it did. Then look what happened when the United States decided that because Muammar Gaddafi was a bad man, that overthrowing him would be a good idea. You want to know what's going to happen to Syria? Look at Libya. Total and complete chaos with rival Islamic terrorist groups vying control from one another. We have made one tragic mistake after another. Look what happened in the Sudan. Look what happened in Somalia. You want to know what's going to happen in Syria? Those are the best ways to predict those occurrences. But we actually don't have to predict them because we were told what was going to happen. Yes, I just took credit for predicting that Islamic jihadists were going to overthrow the Assad regime and that it was going to happen soon. And yes, I did it over and over again, both in printed books and on audio programs such as these. But I didn't have to be a prophet. I didn't even have to read the news to know what was going to occur. Because 2,700 years ago, Yahowah, which is the one and only name of God, inspired one of his prophets. His name is Yahshua. It means Yahweh saves and Yahweh delivers. Known today as Isaiah, to convey specifically what I shared. What he said through Isaiah was that the government of Assyria would fall. And that when the government of Assyria falls, Damascus, the longest continuously inhabited city in the world, would crumble. And that as a continuation of Islamic malfeasance in the region, Islamic terrorists would join those in the Arnon Valley. And therefore, the people who I call Fakistinians, who claim affinity for a ethnicity that ceased to exist over 2,000 years ago, they would join forces with those Muslims and that they would flood into Israel. And that part of the catalyst that will make this happen will be, according to the prophet, Israel will be thinned at the waist at this time. To thin Israel at the waist means the imposition of the two-state solution, which is a horrible misnomer, because there is no solution in dividing Israel. It will only lead to increasing the malfeasance of the Islamic jihadists, just as dividing Czechoslovakia and giving the high ground of that country to Adolf Hitler and to the Nazis led directly to World War II. The imposition of an Islamic terrorist state carved out of the heart of Israel will do exactly the same thing. The prophet predicted all of these things. He has been right about everything. He will continue to be right about everything. And he had a lot more to say as to what would happen in the immediate aftermath of the things I have just shared. And on subsequent programs, I will tell you what's going to occur so that you not only recognize that I'm able to share with you what has not yet occurred, but also explain what has occurred. Now, as it relates to Syria, the organization that overthrew Assad has some interesting legacies in its past and present. One thing that no one bothered to ask, where did the weapons come from? How did these jihadists all of a sudden show up in coordinated uniforms? Who paid for them? Who provided the vehicles that they rode on their blitzkrieg through Aleppo and then south to Damascus? Do you know? The answer is straightforward. We've seen admissions of such. Erdogan. They were funded and they were orchestrated out of Ankara in Turkey. Why would Turkey do so? Now, the reason is that the biggest racial issue in the world today is not this myth that there is a fake people called a Palestinian people, because they don't even exist. No, it's the Kurds, the largest racial ethnicity in the world without their own homeland. And every time that they have come close to establishing some independence and freedom from themselves, it is the Turkish government that seeks to annihilate them. There is this myth that genocide is being perpetrated against Gaza and against the Fakistinians, when less than 1% have died, and when they started the battle, when they initiated the war, acting more cruelly than people in any time in human history, torturing little children, gang raping women, mutilating them, abducting them, committing acts of mass murder. And these terrorists are now the ones that are screaming genocide, when less than 1% have died as a result of the fact that the very terrorists that they gave birth to and inspired came back to hide beneath their skirts, causing this effect. Now, if you look at the Turkish government, they have genocide all over them when they perpetrated it on the retreat after their defeats against Russia in World War I, killing 1 million people. And if you want to understand the mindset of Muslims, if you look back now 75 years ago, at the conclusion of World War II and the establishment of the Israeli state, and the Muslim countries surrounding it, the Jewish population has been decimated. They have endured genocidal wrath, where their populations have decreased by 99.5%. In that same time, the country that is falsely accused of committing genocide, that has more sanctions against it than all nations combined by 2 times over at the United Nations, has created the climate where the Muslim population within Israel has quadrupled. A 4-time increase versus a 99.5% decrease. And the world is so stupid, they'll parrot this absurd notion that Israel is genocidal, when it's Islam that is the death cult. So if you want to know what's going to happen next in Syria, then you should listen to what the prophets have to say. I am unique in this regard, in that I have produced 35 books translating the Dead Sea Scrolls. All free at yadayah.com. Not trying to sell you anything. You can go to yadayah.com and read all of them in their entirety free. We ask nothing from you. There's not even a donate button on our site. And you can go to Amazon or our own bookstore, and you can buy these books without royalty in printed form. It's important that you know the truth. The world is devolving quickly. And I can share with you exactly what's going to happen, when it's going to occur, and what you can do to survive. Now, as it relates to Syria, The jihadists that overthrew the Assad regime will lead to exactly the same fate as what we witnessed when the United States deposed Saddam Hussein, when we killed Muammar Gaddafi. That is the fate. Islamic terrorists will grow in their intensity. They will accumulate more weapons. And the first thing that we saw is when the Turkish-backed militias were successful, they turned on the Kurds and started murdering them. No one wanted to report the truth because that wasn't the story the media wanted to tell. And they're never going to be around to say, I'm sorry, we misled you. These were Islamic terrorists. Why? Because progressives have become the biggest promoters, the big banner wavers for Islam and Islamic terror, leading marches around the world and writing stories protecting the mass murderers. And so they don't want you to know the truth, but I do. I have written 5 volumes, 825 pages apiece. Let me show you what an 825-page book looks like. This is volume 1. There are 4 more volumes, 825 pages apiece, 4,200 pages collectively, presenting Islam as it was spoken and lived by Muhammad. I take every surah in the Quran and translate it for you. Then I place it in chronological order and set it into the context of Muhammad's life, using the 2 oldest chronological presentations of Muhammad, one by Ibn Ishaq, which is called the Sirah, and the other by Al-Tabari, called the Torah or history. And by doing so, by reordering the Quran chronologically, because it is a jumbled mess in its current configuration, and putting it into the context of Muhammad's life through the Hadith, which are the oldest Islamic scriptural sources. One is able for the first time to understand specifically why Muhammad conceived Islam, who his God actually is, and what the first Muslims did. And when you do these things, one of the very first things that you recognize is that Muhammad was a ruthless terrorist. He was a pedophile. He was a rapist. He was a mass murderer. Such people do not make good spokesmen for gods, although they serve devils with aplomb. One of the things that you learn is that the beginning of the Islamic era was when Muhammad, having been driven out of what was Petra, they claim it now to be Mecca, but that's where Islam was actually formed, in shame, with essentially a handful of followers, found a group of pagans in Yathrib, today's Medina, to agree to fight and kill for him for a share of the booty. And he told these men, some 20 of them, if they would pledge to wage war against all humankind on his behalf, that he would reward them with a share of the booty they stole, and then if they died, they would have the booty of bodacious babes in the Islamic paradise. Sure, it was immoral. It was disgusting. But they believed him. And as a result of believing him, Islam was born. And in their first official act, they stole the homes of 1/3 of the Jews in Yathrib, exiled them. With the wealth that they stole from the Jews and Yathrib, that the Jews had earned and the Muslims coveted and stole, they had enough weapons to force the second third of Jews out of town at sword point. And then with the third, a final group of Jews in Yathrib. They killed all the men, cut off their heads in front of Muhammad. They raped the women, and they enslaved the children. Then, if that were not bad enough, the Jews that were run out of their own homes, their homes stolen by the first Muslims, went to a farming community and to reestablish their lives. And then Muhammad chased them down. He and his goons killed the men. They raped the women. They enslaved the children. Muhammad committed genocide against the Jewish people in Arabia. Everything he did in Arabia that is documented in the Islamic scriptural text is what happened on 10/7 of last year in Israel. The world, even Jews, want to blame Hamas. Then they want to blame Hezbollah. Then they want to blame the Shiite regime in Iran. They're not the problem. Islam is. They're just symptoms of this death cult that is so anti-Semitic that it will not cease to kill Jews until every Jew is dead. Should you not care about the fate of Jews? Go away. I don't care about you, nor does God. The fact that you will be next is immaterial to him and to me. But if you're smarter than that, more moral than that, and you can appreciate that Islam is a death cult, that even if you don't know, you're willing to pick up these 5 volumes, read them online, buy the books if you would prefer to read them at Amazon, again, royalty free. Come to understand the nature of this enemy to all humankind. And then you will know, as I do, exactly what's going to happen in Syria and what it's going to lead to. Because these Muslim militants are going to gather in numbers, and they are not going to be content on staying in Syria. The very name of the organization means the organization. In fact, it's Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. It's the organization for the liberation of the Levant. Understand that there is no freedom in Islam. Islam means submission. All Muslims are slaves to Allah. There can be no democracy ever in an Islamic country. The Quran forbids it. So they're not trying to liberate Syria or the Levant. They're trying to control it. And that's what Muslims are ordered to do in the Quran and Hadith. When Muslims shout from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, or free Palestine, 2 things should be obvious to you. One is there is no such thing as Palestine. It is a complete myth. There has never been a Palestine. There will never be a Palestinian people. But also there is no freedom in Islam. All you need to do is look at Afghanistan if you want to see Islam in action. What does the Levant mean? Al-Sham. Well, it means everything from Iraq, to Syria, to Jordan, to Lebanon, and to Israel. They will not be content until they control it all, and therefore destroy it all. That is their intent. It is in their name. That is what you should expect. At the close of this program, I want to share some things that you may not know. Well, I have done 5,000 talk radio programs as a guest on syndicated talk radio shows. And I have done 5,000 more as a host of my own show, Shattering Myths. And I've done 5,000 more on top of that with an audio blog under Yada Yahowah Radio. this is just the beginning of visual video programming. But in all of that time, I've had a consistent message. And one of the things that makes my message unique is that all of human recorded history, no one has done what I have done. Now, if we recognize that the Torah is now 3,400 years old, that Christianity is 2,000 years old, Judaism was conceived to thwart the effects of Christianity, so it is of the same age, and that Islam is 1,400 years old. In all of that time, no one other than myself has composed numerous volumes to prove emphatically, without any doubt, overwhelmingly, that not only is Islam false, deadly, but has also taken the time to write 5 volumes proving the same thing is true with Christianity. I've also written 3 volumes disproving the religion of Judaism. No one has ever done those things. And on top of that, collectively on that bookshelf at yadayah.com, there are 35 volumes, some 20,000 pages of analysis of my translations of the Dead Sea Scrolls, proving that Yahweh exists, that is God's name, and that he has a specific agenda, a series of things he is offering us, and those that he is asking in return. And so I speak to you today as his voice, as one encouraging you to go to yadayah.com. Start with the first book on the shelf. It's an introduction to God. It will tell you specifically who Yahweh is, who you should be if you're interested in knowing him, and who am I as the person bringing you together. Again, every word is free online in their entirety. There's no donate button, not looking for anything from you. Strictly want you to know the truth. I want you to know that no matter what your religion or politics are, that your religious and political leaders have misled you and deliberately, and that they have sought to control you, and the God that I represent and speak for wants to liberate you, and he wants you to come home. So I thank you for listening. This is our first of what will be many hundreds of video broadcasts, all designed to help you understand the world as it is, where it is going, to help you understand who God is, what he is offering, what he is expecting in return. I thank you for listening. My name is Craig Wynn.